As I indicated in my email earlier in the week, I was going to talk principally today about kind of a way that I see my practice as what I termed Soto Zen Universalist. But before I get into that fascinating topic, just a couple of brief things. One of them is a throwback to a month or more ago on a Saturday morning, a talk I gave. One of the items that I brought up in that talk involved a therapy dog. Well, lo and behold, this was actually now about 2 weeks ago exactly in the Plain Dealer. This is him. At the airport. Boy. So beautiful dog. I'll put it up on the table so those of you that are here can get a better look at it, but you'll see what I meant. He's a true bodhisattva. And the other item, a couple of kind of related pieces, which are coming out of Christianity, but the nature of the story certainly has bearing on Buddhism and all other religious spiritual practices. The first one that comes from the New York Times is titled Finding God in the App Store. Subtitled, Millions Are Turning to Chatbots for Guidance from On High. I mean, this is hardly surprising, I don't think. There's clearly some money to be made here. And, you know, if televangelists were able to make a pretty good revenue stream from the older technology, the current technology lends itself to much the same sort of thing. And the other piece was talking about the canonization of the rather young guy, Carlo Acutis, who died at the age of 15, just 19 years ago, and he's already canonized. And it talks about how he was known for using the internet to further his faith, maintaining a website documenting Eucharistic miracles recognized by the church, which earned him the moniker God's influencer. And that earned him his passage to sainthood, among other things. I'm sure he's a pretty outstanding young guy, but we're in that age, and you know, turning to chatbots for guidance from on high. I think the frequency of Dokusan for me is going to really plummet. It'll be so much more convenient, and you know, I guess there's something a little less intense about doing it that way. So, hey, it's coming to Zen. I'm sure it's already here. They're just not writing about it because how many Zen practitioners are there? Not too many, I don't think, relatively speaking.
I'll stick with face to face, please.
I'm glad. All right, so let's get into the main topic. The the matter of how we consider ourselves. And before I get into what I said this would be about, I should backtrack in my practice. I guess this would be like 20, 24 years. I remember when Reb Anderson was not here at Wilton, but here with our Sangha at that time, doing a weekend retreat at the old Cleveland Buddhist temple. One of the questions he put to all of us there was how many of us consider ourselves to be Buddhist? And I didn't raise my hand. Even though the previous year I had received my first Rakusu. I'd gone through Jukai. And, at a certain level, I certainly would have considered myself to be Buddhist. But at that point in my practice, in Rinzai terms, you could say I was working on the intro koan of Mu. For us, that would be working on the Prajnaparamita teachings about the emptiness of all things, including Buddhism. So I was being very sincere based on my practice then about not raising my hand. That in a certain sense, of course, and I recognize that, to any objective observer, it's say, yeah, he's Buddhist. He sure looks like one, talks like one, must be one. But to not get caught in what that might signify. So that, I think, is an important intro to what I wanted to talk about in terms of, now, I would see myself as Soto Zen, but the Universalists I tack on there with a nod to the Unitarian Universalists, which is a merger of two churches, the Unitarians and the Universalists. And their notion of universalist has certainly shifted over time. Initially, historically, universalism for them had to do with salvation. It meant they were kind of putting the kibosh on notions of hell. The universal was in terms of who all was going to be saved. It was universal. But they fell under the Christian umbrella, and certainly the Unitarians did too. And some of them were burned at the stake. They go back to the days of the Reformation, because the Catholic Church was kind of dug in on this notion of the Trinity. And of course, that's what the Unitarians were indicating was erroneous teaching, that there's only one unity. So you have these two traditions coming together, the Unitarian and the Universalist. They just merged. And I've certainly had a lot of experience over the years working with the Unitarians. Even was in a relationship with one for a few years. And I think it's safe and accurate to say that their notion of universalism now would be more in terms of open to all traditions, and including, secular humanists, atheists, agnostics, everybody. So universal isn't so much pointing to salvation, fact, salvation for most Unitarian Universalists would be an alien term. They'd say, oh, we're beyond that. So I just wanted to kind of,
It's similar to our idea of one Dharma.
yeah, exactly. So I just lay that out to kind of try to delineate in a certain sense what I'm expressing in terms of Soto Zen being kind of my where my roots are. This is, I might say, my platform. And another analogy, which won't surprise you to hear me put it in these kinds of terms, would be like within jazz, to recognize one's roots in jazz, but not to feel like that's defining in any sense, what you're doing. In fact, some weeks back when Wilco was here, the Plain Dealer had an article the Sunday before about their guitarist, Nels Klein, a pretty long, lengthy piece, because he's a jazz guitarist, even though he plays in this rock band. It has for over 20 years. And he was talking about this. What's really important to him is certainly he understood his jazz roots and grounding, but to have that, not to feel that he was bound by that. That actually what he derived from that in his background was the ability to freely adapt other styles. Jazz, which one of the things I love about it is there is that sense of freedom, of liberation. So that's kind of where I would position what I was trying to maybe clumsily describe in terms of Soto Zen Universalist, is just like Nels Klein sees himself as grounded in jazz, I see myself as very grounded in Soto Zen. But I think the Universalist side, if I reflect on, for instance, my teaching style, is not, grounded, that fixed in within that. That it I feel is just like Nels does, the need to actually be able to take that practice elsewhere and bring other elements into it. But it's all coming out of my Soto Zen practice. But it's seeing it in this open sense, the sense that prevented me from raising my hand back in 2001. No, I don't want to just, be labeled that way. It's a problematic matter there. But to certainly recognize and honor that tradition and the teachers and everyone I've practiced with, including this Sangha. And the reason why I teach within the Soto Zen tradition is because I think it's a very helpful way to liberate people so that they can not feel bound by any one set of rituals and traditions and teachings and so on. So the teachings, for me, within Soto Zen, are to transcend the teachings. They're not about, hey, look at me. Look at this teaching. Isn't this a great teaching? It's simply to, as the song The Precious Mirror Samadhi puts it, to free you from obstructions. Thousands of words, myriad interpretations are only to free you from obstructions. To free you from obstructions is to liberate you. So, as Dylan put it, you can dance beneath the moonlit sky with one hand waving free. That's practice. Hey, Mr. Tambourine Man. So, and the universalist piece to it, I think I think you all know this by now. I like pulling in other traditions, both religious and non-religious, and seeing them as all, part of this search for truth, for meaning, the things we value about ourselves, about others, about existence. And, so many of the things that I have been able to engage in because of my Soto Zen practice in particular. If it wasn't for that practice, I wouldn't have had the interfaith experience with Interact Cleveland, for instance. My ability to deepen my appreciation of the relationship between Zen and jazz. Because without this practice, I wouldn't have been facilitating performances at the Cleveland Buddhist Temple, sometimes at West Shore Unitarian, when a piano was needed. So many things that kind of allowed me to enter into the universalist realm were outflows of my particular Soto Zen practice. They just connect so well, rather than the tendency that a particular tradition might have to kind of trap us, to confine us. I have found this tradition to be the reverse of that, to be really a door opener to what will come next. And not to say, well, that's not Soto Zen, so I shouldn't do that. That thought never enters into my mind. Can be very comfortable in any setting. And I think that just kind of comes with, to some extent, that I guess that's a unique trait to me, but it's also reflective of this tradition. So when I threw out that term in my email, that's kind of where I was coming from. And I just wanted to take the opportunity this morning to give expression to that. And, certainly will tie back to the teachings of interdependence, which are just kind of like a further elaboration of the teachings on emptiness. So this relationship of the one and the many, the myriad things. and that nothing falls outside of the one. So nothing falls outside of Soto Zen. So that's not some sort of box. I mean, only from one perspective, it might look like a box because we have certain teachings we would call Soto Zen, certain rituals we would call Soto Zen. But as I suggested earlier in this talk, these are all designed to transcend the box, to make the box drop off. We talk about dropping off of body and mind. It's a complete dropping off of everything. And before practice, that sort of notion would be, just fill us with terror. Oh my God, who would do that? But through the practice, we can't imagine, or at least I can't imagine, any other way of being.
Mhm.
So that, in a nutshell, is what I wanted to talk about this morning. So still have plenty of time for your thoughts and questions and whatever. So I'll bow out. Joe.
I think I know the answer to this. I'm going to ask anyhow. I want to complete the circle of emptiness. Back in 2001, if Reb had changed his question to who in this room does not consider themselves a Buddhist, what would your answer
I probably would have shot my arm up. Yeah, but I mean, that's just looking back. But where I could still pretty clearly recall, the nature of what I was working through at the time. And I mean, 2 years later, in 2003, as I've commented on numerous times, the 3-week intensive practice period at San Francisco Zen Center, where the Dharma theme was the Four Noble Truths. But I came in there with my own Dharma theme. It was emptiness. I was still practicing Mu, the koan Mu. So that's what I was working on. Certainly, I'd listened to their talks on the Four Noble Truths, but once the talk was over, I'm back. Okay, I'm back to Mu. The emptiness of the Four Noble Truths, just like the Heart Sutra spells out. So I could make that loop real easy. So that was an ongoing, because it is something that that's so important to this practice, is to be able to break through that barrier of where all of the things we reify, we make real based on language and our response to language. So to be liberated from language is such a beautiful thing. I mean, reading, you can see these words that are trying to pull you in, especially in our time. The power of language. And we're becoming masters of that. We being the powers that be, in order to manipulate people. So to be able to see the true nature of language, that it's empty, all of a sudden you're not very prone to being pulled in by it. You can actually take that more expansive view. And that is definitely liberating. Liberating from all of the stuff that's dangled out there in front of us. Be able to see that every usage of a word at its heart, it's to see that everything is contained within it. So we take that more expansive view to everything that comes in front of us. And when you do that, now it's pretty difficult to get pulled in, to be hooked, because you're looking at it more expansively. John?
So I'm thinking back to my tradition. I grew up evangelical.
Mhm.
The big thing about any evangelical movement is it wants to spread itself.
Yes, yes.
Universalism seems to go against that, and I'm wondering, how does this tie into freeing all beings? If
What being? How does it tie into?
freeing all beings,
Oh, freeing all
all
beings.
beings,
Gotcha.
in the sense that
Right.
if a movement does not replicate itself, what becomes it?
Well, it's the emptiness of the movement. When we're looking at our practice, and that's the key, is the movement that, like an evangelistic movement, that sees itself as having a concrete truth that they're trying to bring everybody into. That's not liberating. Actually, it's kind of like a movement to, you might even say, to enslave people in terms of their minds, their spirits. So practices, and I certainly don't include all of Christianity within that uh, category. There are plenty of Christians that are very open. That was one of the great benefits of my work in the interfaith community. Unfortunately, they're the congregations that are dwindling. And the evangelicals are the ones that are kind of the mega churches, and they're doing pretty well. But in terms, to come back to your question about the liberating, I mean, the engine behind the liberation is the teachings on emptiness. That's where the liberation comes from. And what we're being liberated from are the cubicles that we create. Even if they're societal, we accept them. So it's to be able to transcend those, but not go into some anarchistic setting. That's why within our practice, things like the precepts and the Eightfold Path, we have these guidelines. But we can practice guidelines also from this standpoint of being liberated. But it's not like, the Wild West. Actually, that liberation includes deep caring for everyone. So in Thursday night's talk, I introduced a term that I think we'll be coming back to regularly, of cooperation. Because as we look at evolution, the theory of evolution, which has been built up as the survival of the fittest, And actually, it's the survival of those who cooperate the best. Otherwise, Homo sapiens wouldn't really have been all that successful as our ability to cooperate. In fact, PBS's Nova, they've got a series, Human Origins, that just launched this past week. In fact, Thursday after the talk, I go home, make my popcorn. This is my Thursday ritual. It's a ritual. And I decide, what am I going to watch? And I recalled, oh yeah, there's this Nova thing that's on at 9:00. So I pull it up, and at almost the very end of it, the chief narrator starts using terms that I had just used. I mean, including the definition of synergy. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts in cooperation. I'm going, talk about synchronicities. That one kind of was pushing it. But that's, and it's a series. I'm not sure how many more episodes there will be, but it's a pretty good accounting of this notion of evolution. So I definitely give it strong recommendation. But yeah, this notion of cooperation, I think, is such an important term in connection with teachings on interdependence. That's what interdependence is working together in cooperation. So in our time, the Huayan teachings are teachings of cooperation. And then, as I suggested Thursday, this notion of the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. This is what makes life so incredibly rich, is because of cooperation and interdependence. It's kind of like that one author I brought into the mix, his book titled Nature's Magic. That's the magic, is interdependence. Because that's where you get the whole being greater than the sum of the parts. It's the magic of cooperation, of interdependence. And voila, we get this. All of this.
Emptiness.
Emptiness. Right.
Thank you for this teaching. This is extremely important, I think. I mean, because it moves beyond just the idea of emptiness as a Buddhist term,
Right.
to universal.
Yeah. Because there's nothing outside of it. That's the deal.
Well, I have. I'm sure everybody else has a really hard time understanding what that is.
Yeah.
We don't understand what it is,
Right.
nor can we, but
Right.
I want to, damn it. And I was thinking about, when we first come to this practice, when I first came to this practice, I was looking for a long time about, and just not searching in some organized way, but just open to the stuff. And when I finally found this, and one of the things that brought me here it wasn't Zen, it was the Dalai Lama saying in one of his talks, well, if Buddhism didn't agree with science,
Yeah.
I guess we'd have to change Buddhism.
Right.
This is my guy.
Yeah. It would be to actually, I would say to the Dalai Lama, it would be changing Buddhism to not change to what science is teaching. That's what would change Buddhism.
And then it was really hard not to go.
Yeah.
So this teaching, extremely important. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else before we chant out? Joe?
Maybe a little brief history of your time before Buddhism. What was happening in your life as far as your
Oh.
religious beliefs, your real beliefs? Or
My
were you
real-
just lost in searching.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would have considered myself non-religious. And I think I would have, while people are reluctant to use the term atheist for good logical reasons, which I appreciate because it's hard to prove something doesn't exist. But going along with Bertrand Russell, I would have said, actually, in terms of like the Christian view of God, I'm truly an atheist because I would rank the likelihood of that on a par with the likelihood of like the actual truth of the Greek and the Roman pantheon. They're on the same level. So I consider myself an atheist in terms of Greek and Roman mythology. So to be truthful, am I in the strict logical sense an atheist? Well, no, but for all practical purposes, it's not like it could be. I really don't think so. I do not think so.
Is she really looking down, taking notes?
Well, and as I've said before, the more likely story would be the pimply-faced teenage kid in another dimension, and we're just kind of a computer simulation. He's God. That's the kid subscribe to. That's way more likely. I'm an agnostic on that point. But in terms of the biblical description, I'm an atheist. I just don't think there's hardly any likelihood at all. But I always had that soft spot for the mystical traditions who weren't spouting off all this dogma. So certainly Eastern thought, Taoism, Buddhism, Hinduism, and the mystical strains within Christianity, St. John of the Cross and Meister Eckhart especially. They struck a chord with me. Because occasionally, having been a student of philosophy, that was my major. And one of the most important, I've brought this into a few Dharma talks over the years, Wittgenstein's Tractatus, which is like 100 pages, and it's a logical depiction of reality, predicated on logic. But when he gets to the very end, he opens it up to that which can't be accounted for, and he talks about what can't be expressed, we must pass over in silence. And he also used the metaphor of climbing a ladder and then throwing the ladder aside. So he recognized the role being played by these mystical traditions that are going up that ladder and recognizing that it won't get you there, nor will all these logical depictions. That you have to make that leap from the 1,000-foot pole, as Zen koan literature puts it. Make that leap. Otherwise, we're putting ourselves in that box. And it's not, satisfying. That's what leads us elsewhere, is the lack of satisfaction. Mick Jagger. Kimberly.
What about yoga, like Buddhist psychology? I know that's more of like the Tibetan strain
Mm-hmm.
or aspect, but like, well, I'm just wondering if within Zen, because I really do practice a lot of that, or the Yogacara. I'm wondering if you, as a group, because I'm new, have studied Ben's book on the Yogacara together.
Well, he's got 2 books on the Yogacara. And I don't think
Yogacara?
yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
no problem. But he's come here because he's visited us after every book he's published. So we've heard his teachings, and many of us have both of his books on the Yogacara and have read them. So, one of the my first teacher was a Jungian analyst. That was her professional. And Buddhist psychology goes back to the Abhidharma. And that was kind of her specialty. But she also taught Yogacara. And their main sutra was the Samdhi Nirmochana Sutra. And we did, under her, study that sutra, which puts forth the 3 natures teaching, which one of Ben's books is about. So I had studied that in some detail. And the 8 consciousnesses, including the storehouse.
Yes.
Yeah.
I do have both of those books.
Oh,
but
good.
I haven't gone in depth.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Whereas the Abhidharma, I never could warm up to that, and I wanted to because I honored my first teacher, and I figured, well, this is her bag. And so a couple of you, probably just John and Chris, would remember, hopefully, when Beth Jacobs came here, and she had just written a book on the Abhidharma. So I was able to arrange for her to come here from Chicago. And that's what her teachings were on, from her book on the Abhidharma. My issue with that was it definitely is not grounded in the teachings on emptiness. Yeah, they are very out there about the nature of existence, that there are things, entities, So I can remember in Dokusan with my teacher, we'd have that discussion because I was a subscriber to Prajnaparamita teaching. So there are no entities, no entities.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know a lot.
oh,
So I'm just trying to, yeah, I just noticed that you don't really teach on just like the psychological aspect, whether it's Western or Buddhist so much. So I'm picking up on that correctly.
yeah. Well, you need to talk to John because I'm more than happy to, as he knows, I don't have to give all the talks, and John is our resident expertise in that arena, so he'd be the perfect person to lead that, which would be terrific. Because I know that a lot of teachings are out there that are rooted in psychology, and a lot of people with much justification would consider Buddhism as kind of like a school of psychology. Would consider the Buddha to have been the first psychologist. Yeah, especially if I'm speaking to Unitarian audiences, which I have from time to time, I've certainly made that statement with them to make it a little more accessible to them so they have a point they can connect into then.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've said this before, but that goes along with what the Dalai Lama, when he was asked what Buddhism was about, he said it was the science of mind.
Yeah. 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 I mean, within Zen, I mean, ordinary mind is the way. Matsu.
But I wonder if the ordinary mind is just so conflicted and full of delusions. How does a person even?
Well, that's where our tradition about the oneness of delusion and enlightenment, that ordinary mind is the way, is pointing to that basic truth. That if you're trying to get rid of delusion, that is deluded. That to where our awakening takes place is right in our delusion. And then, that's why the metaphor of the lotus in muddy water.
Right.
Yeah. The lotus representing our enlightened being, but it can only come up because of the delusion.
I mean, I get that. That's very simplistic. Which is why it's what that is. No, it could go on and on. It's so interesting.
It's too easy.
It can go on and on and on. Or it can stop right here. Thank you. Because I'm also thinking of lines that are in our daily chant book.
Mm-hmm. Good. That's great.
You know, that just
Yeah.
that do kind of bring up the question I just had. Like if one is so deluded,
Mm-hmm. But awakening happens in this moment, not the next moment or the moment after that. It's right now. So you don't have to go through this pure, and that's a big difference from the Theravadan tradition. I've got one of their principal texts at home, although I haven't read very much of it, The Path of Purification. And that's that title sums up the nature of that practice. is to purify oneself. And Zen is about awakening in the moment. There is no path in terms of the purification. Because now you're putting it off into the future. And awakening can only happen right now. Because otherwise, it doesn't come. You could be purified and not awakened. It has to come right here. And the delusion is not a hindrance when it comes forth. That's our interpretation. But that's why Zazen, just being able in this moment to sit, settle, and open ourselves up in that field of muddy water. But we open ourselves so there's room for that shoot to come up of the lotus.
One of the things I read was the good news is that obstruction is the way.
Yeah.
The bad news is obstruction is the way.
Yeah.
Through it,
Yeah, exactly.
but it's right here. So
Right. Yeah, you don't have to go looking for it.
it's fine.
It already has.
Not will, but
Mhm.
Congregates and comes.
Right. Exactly. So everything is a Dharma gate. Transformative moments. They're all around us. You know, when I do my Zen jazz talk, there's liner notes of Keith Jarrett from one of his solo concert recordings, and he says exactly that, and I use his quote every time I give that talk about how we think transformative moments are these rare things that maybe will happen once in a blue moon. And he says, but what if the reality is that they're all around us, and we just have to awaken to them. And oh, wow. So that's why the practice of Zazen is just this, the heart of that is opening ourselves up so that transformative moment has a chance to appear. You know, you need, even in the muddy water, you have to be able to break through the lotus. It needs to get through, but it can. All it takes, and that's what our practice is allowing the lotus the opportunity to break through. We don't have to call in the environmental team to clear out all the muck first. It'll spring up right there in the middle of it. Practice is simply creating that capacity to allow the shoot to come up. It's there. It's there. Okay. John?
So my brother-in-law is practicing transcendental meditation.
Mhm. Chris is our expert on that.
And I know nothing about it other than it costs money. But
We're just suggested donations.
yeah. I'm just trying to understand the idea of like just sitting in kind of the ordinary mind. My understanding is transcendental meditation is about achieving certain states. Is that complementary, or is that like a hindrance in action or in theory?
Yeah, I could take a stab
Yeah,
at that.
please,
I don't
please.
think there's a huge difference there. So, as Dean was talking about realizations within the moment, you might say that you go beyond what the mind ordinarily does. So thinking stops, and then you get in touch with something else that's more universal or empty. And the same thing happens with transcendental meditation. So the only difference is that rather than just observing whatever sensations or thoughts come up, you're actually focused on a mantra. And the mantra is the vehicle, if you will, that helps you to your mind to settle into this more universal consciousness. So I would say that they're a different method, but the same result, if you will. Yeah, that's helpful. Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. Well, that's cool that he's doing that. Yeah, that's cool.
Well, looks like we're good then. May our intention equally penetrate every being and place with the true merit of Buddha's way. Beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to become it.